William's bride was a distant cousin called Matilda. She was the daughter of Normandy's most powerful neighbour, the Count of Flanders. Even in marriage, the young Duke never forgot politics.
But William and Matilda appear to have been happy together, despite their rather ill-assorted appearance. He was almost 6 foot. She, apparently, only 4 foot 3 inches. At first, the Pope prohibited their wedding on the grounds that they were too closely related. The Church had very strict rules at this time about marriage between cousins, however distant. But they went ahead and got married anyway, and then did penance by building their 2 abbeys. This is Matilda's, the great Abbey aux Dames.
The Abbeys of Caen are a high point of Norman church building. This was a golden age for Normandy, and William was asserting his Christian piety and the magnificence of his power. The abbeys share the same imperial pretensions as the Church of Mont Saint-Michel, but they are more sophisticated. Their arches more graceful, their columns more refined. The Duke was a fervent Christian, but he'd been hardened by his enemies and the trials of his childhood.
William could be devastatingly savage. One story that concerns his siege of the city of Alençon tells how the defenders hung out animal skins over the battlements to mock the fact that his mother was an embalmer's daughter. When he captured the place, William ordered the offenders' hands and feet to be cut off, and then their eyes to be gouged out, to satisfy his desire for revenge.
William ruthlessly restored Normandy's power, prestige, and wealth. One Norman historian remarked that he was ruler of his whole land, something which is scarcely found anywhere else.
By the time he was in his 30s, William was secure enough to consider expanding his territories. In 1063, he invaded the county of Maine, which lies to the south of Normandy, crushed the fierce resistance he encountered, and added it to his dominions. But he already had in mind a yet greater prize, a large and powerful kingdom that lay not far away across the sea.
What happened next would catapult the Normans and their ambitious leader to the very centre of European power. 11th century England offered much more than just territory. King Edward the Confessor ruled over one of the wealthiest and best governed states in Europe. Efficient and highly centralised. Only the king could mint money. And the English silver penny was famous for its purity and stability. Most importantly, money flowed into the royal treasury thanks to England's sophisticated tax system.
But England was confronting the most dangerous prospect that a medieval kingdom could face: the death of a king without an heir. King Edward the Confessor was later to be made a saint, partly because, it is said, he lived and died a virgin, even though married. But from the point of view of dynastic politics, the death of a childless ruler was a disaster, and disaster was looming.
King Edward was dying, and the Normans had become so entwined in the dynastic networks of Europe that William could make a plausible claim to the English throne. He was Edward's cousin and had known him since childhood.
When Edward succeeded to the English throne in 1042, he'd been living in exile in Normandy for almost 25 years. He was a stranger in his own land who knew his cousin, Duke William, far better than he knew the English aristocracy. William even claimed that Edward promised him the English throne after Edward's death. And that was a prize William was determined to get his hands on.
In France, William was a duke, but in England, he could be a king. And kingship in the Middle Ages was an institution blessed and approved by God. But William had a rival. Earl Harold Godwinson had no hereditary claim to the throne, but he was the richest man in England, a successful general and a skillful politician. He claimed that Edward had promised him the throne too. The Norman Duke's claim to the English throne was strengthened when Harold made a mysterious journey to northern France in 1064. The story is told at the beginning of the greatest surviving record of the Norman conquest.
This is the Bayeux Tapestry, one of the most amazing objects surviving from the Middle Ages. It's over 900 years old, and it sheds a unique light on that period. The 11th century is a distant and in some ways a dark period, but then suddenly, like a searchlight cutting through that darkness, we have this 70 meters of detailed visual imagery. It's a masterpiece of needlework. The colors are clear and fresh. And when we look in detail, we can see how carefully observed every scene is. You can tell from this who are the English and who are the Normans by their hairstyle. The English invariably have shoulder-length hair and moustaches. The Normans are clean-shaven with a savagely high razor cut at the back. Modern historians can enrich their story with photographs or film. Medievalists can't do that, but once in a while they have a wonderful gift of something like this, something like a medieval film strip, which tells us about a remarkable event in European history.
It's believed that the tapestry was commissioned by William's half-brother, Bishop Odo. Its size and complexity tell us the Normans regarded this expedition as more than just another bout of war-making. It begins with Harold's journey to France. We don't know why he went, but we do know that the voyage would lead to disaster for Harold and for England.
Here we see Harold and his men getting on board ship. They're sailing into the Channel across to France. The wind blows them, unfortunately, to enemy soil, the land of Guy of Ponthieu, who imprisons them. Duke William of Normandy gets to hear about this, and he demands that Harold should be sent to him. And when he's there, he treats Harold as an honoured guest. He even invites him to go on campaign with him. So Harold is actually fighting in William's army. We see the army proceeding towards Brittany. They pass Mont Saint-Michel on their way. Harold distinguishes himself in this warfare. He's a kind of hero. And in return, William actually knights him. He gives him arms, a sign of great honor, but also perhaps a sign of subordination. And then, on their return to Normandy, we have one of the most important scenes in the whole tapestry. It shows Harold taking an oath, his hands on reliquaries, that is, containers with saints' bones inside, swearing to Duke William. It doesn't say what the oath is. William's story is that the oath was, "I, Harold, will support your claim to be the next King of England." We'll never know exactly what happened. Some people think it's unlikely that Harold, the most powerful man in England, with an eye to becoming king himself, would take this oath. But what is clear is what William thought had happened. Harold had sworn before God to recognize him as the next King of England. And it was on that he based his invasion of England in 1066.
The death of Edward the Confessor on the 5th of January 1066 was like the crack of a starting gun. First in the field was Harold. He wasted no time and had himself crowned king in Westminster Abbey on the same day as Edward's funeral. In Normandy, William was out hunting when he heard the news. According to one historian, he became as a man outraged. Another chronicler denounced Harold as a pseudo-king. Worse, he had perjured himself, committing a grave sin against God. Nature itself appeared to be disturbed by this wickedness. A few months after Harold's coronation, Halley's comet appeared in the sky.
For people in the Middle Ages, the appearance of a comet was a sign from heaven. It meant some great change was about to occur, perhaps the downfall of a regime. A comet was even called the Terror of Kings, and Harold had reason to be afraid.
Nothing could now stop a Norman bid to remove the usurper. Ever the politician, William first launched a diplomatic offensive. He asked his barons and the rulers of other European kingdoms to support his claim to the English throne.
William sought support everywhere. He even sent envoys to Rome to get the backing of Pope Alexander. They came back with a papal banner to carry into battle, one of the first ever issued. In the words of the Norman chronicler, William of Poitiers, he could now attack his enemies with greater boldness and security. William had God on his side.
The way was clear for a full-scale military invasion. William of Jumièges recounts the felling of trees to construct a fleet of 3,000 ships. Enough to carry 250,000 men to England. With all their horses, weapons and armour.
William of Jumièges was exaggerating. He was, after all, the official historian of the Normans. We now think that